Hello students, this is Mrs. Levinson and we are going to be doing lesson 7.06 hydrogen and metallic bonding today. Make sure that you have read the textbook Explorer, Hydrogen and Bonding and Metallic Bonding, and I did post the CC slides if you want them, and then when you're done, make sure that you do the quiz. So let's go ahead and go through our slides today. And it is March 1st, lesson 706. Remember, I'm an ACT testing. That's why we're doing a recording today. All right, so in lesson 706, we are talking about hydrogen bonding and metallic bonding. These are a different type of bonding than what we've discussed. In the past, we talked about covalent bonding, sharing electrons, and ionic bonding, where one atom gives electrons to another atom and they stick together because of the opposite charges. But these are different. These are not bonding from one atom to another atom to make a molecule or a lattice. Instead, this is bonding that happens in hydrogen bonding between actually different molecules, like two molecules of water, or a molecule of water and a molecule of something else. Or in the case of metallic bonding, it's basically like all the atoms are together. All of the atoms are positive ions, and all those little electrons that they gave up are just floating around in between. It's funky, it's weird, it's cool. So let's go ahead and look at these. So there are two different types of bonding. We have intramolecular bonding, where that intra means within a single molecule. For example, a single water molecule when the oxygen and the hydrogen bond. In this case, for this lesson, intramolecular would be metallic bonding, where the metal ions are bonded to other metal ions because of the behavior of those valence electrons. The other type of bonding is intermolecular bonding, where the inter means between different molecules, one molecule to another molecule. And in this case, that's going to be the hydrogen bonding. It only happens between covalently bonded molecules. There's a couple of analogies off to the side here. Intrastate, intramolecule within a single molecule, intrastate within a single state. For example, the Circle Highway that goes around Columbus, Ohio. It's just within Ohio, it's nowhere else. Intermolecule, interstate, which means it's different molecules, one molecule to another molecule, whereas interstate would be a highway that goes from one state to another state to another state, like I-71 goes all the way from Ohio down to the tip of Florida. All right, so there's your analogy to help you remember. Let's talk about metallic bonding. Metallic bonding is the force of attraction between valence electrons in metal ions. These metal ions are sharing the detached electrons, and the metal ions are positive ions. It's just tons and tons and tons of positive metal ions that are all stacked next to each other in layers, and these valence electrons are floating around between the ions. So ion to ion to ion to ion. There's a great little video clip in your lesson that shows it, and it is something that you guys should watch. So notice the electrons are free flowing from atom to atom to atom. These free flowing electrons are what gives the metal atoms or the metal ions their metallic properties. It's what makes them magnetic. It's what makes them conductive of electricity and heat. It's what makes them shiny, solid at room temperature, malleable and ductile. Remember, malleable, if you hit it with a hammer, it's going to dent. It dents instead of breaks. Remember, brittle breaks, malleable dents. It's malleable because those free-flowing electrons cause these metal ions to stick together. The electrons are like the glue between the positive ions, and that's what makes it malleable. You can dent it instead of break it, and that's what makes it ductile. That means you can pull it out into the wire. So as you pull these metal atoms apart, instead of pulling completely apart, what happens is the metal ions flow, and they line up and get pulled into a long straight line. That's wire. All right. And this little video in the lesson is on page 4. So make sure as you go through the reading that you read these word for word. Don't skip around. Don't just look for a particular answer and move on. Read it word for word, because you need those main ideas. You need the vocabulary words, and you need the examples. Okay. So let's see if we can get this little video to load, and there it is. And now we can watch it, and as you watch the video, you can see that these ions are flowing all around each of these metal atoms. I'm going to restart it and do it again, if it'll let me. There it goes. Okay. Let's see. Here we go. So you watch those metal ions. The ions that flow from atom to atom to atom are what holds those atoms together like glue. So these little valence electrons that are going all over the place, they're like the glue that holds the atoms together. Okay. And the fact that these ions move from atom to atom to atom to atom, that flow of electrons, by definition, electrical current is the flow of electrons. Electrical current is the flow of electrons. Electrical current, or a one-way direction for electrons to flow, is actually what causes magnetism. You can actually take a magnet, flow it, and move it across a wire, and it will cause an electrical current. Okay? That's something we actually looked at first semester a little bit. And so electrons can be pulled towards the positive charge in a group of metal ions. Electrical current can cause magnetism. Magnetism can cause electrical current. If you run a magnet over a wire, you can cause electrical current. If an electrical current is running through a wire, it will be magnetic. You'll have a north pole and a south pole, just like a magnet. Pretty cool stuff. Types of intramolecular bonds. So now we're getting somewhat out of the metallic bonds, which is in intramolecular, and we're going to go towards the hydrogen bonds, but intramolecular, within a molecule. So the bond between the hydrogen and the chlorine, this is one single molecule, that's intramolecular. The bond that holds the positive ion to the positive ion, these flowing electrons, that's intramolecular. The bonding that's between the sodium and the chlorine, intramolecular ionic bond, right? And now we're going to talk about hydrogen bonds, intermolecular, but from molecule to molecule, between molecules. The positive hydrogen on an atom or in a molecule is attracted to the negative atom from another molecule. Why? We call it hydrogen bonding. What does it do that's important? And the reason it happens is because we know opposite charges attract. Think about water. We know water has a slightly positive end with those hydrogens and a slightly negative end with the oxygens. Why? Because oxygen is an electron hog, right? So water is polar. It has a positive end and a negative end. Well, those positive hydrogens get attracted to polar molecules that are around them, including other water molecules. So the properties of ice are due to hydrogen bonding. Think about it. Ice floats in water. Normally, we think that the solids are more dense than liquids, but that's not true with ice. And the reason is because the hydrogen bonding causes the ice molecules or the water molecules in a solid form to be spaced out a little farther than liquid molecules. And that openness between the solid molecules is what reduces the density. They're more spread out, that's all it is. So hydrogen bonding is very important also in living things. The formation of proteins and nucleic acids, think DNA, RNA, you'll learn more about that in biology next year. The building blocks of life, the body's tissues, those all depend on hydrogen bonding because what they do is they make molecules stick together. DNA is not a single molecule. DNA is actually a grouping of molecules stuck together in a certain shape, right? It's a grouping of molecules. And those molecules are sticky and they stick to each other. How do they stick to each other? Hydrogen bonding. The positive hydrogens on one molecule stick to the negative something on another molecule. It depends on what's negative to what it sticks to. Not all molecules are the same, so they might be something different. Hydrogen bonding is why water sticks to itself. Water molecules stick to other water molecules, and what this causes is cohesion in plants. Okay? In other words, it causes cohesion of water molecules. If you see a droplet of water on a plant, why do the molecules in that droplet stick together? How come they don't just fall apart? And it's because of hydrogen bonding. It's what causes capillary actions in plants. Plants actually have little tubes in them. And those tiny little tubes are called capillaries. And water will actually climb the capillaries. They'll climb up the tubes. Think of it like water climbing up a straw. And why does that happen? Because the positive ends, the hydrogens on the water will stick to the negative sides of the tube, and it'll end up pushing each other up the tube. That's why water can go all the way from the roots to the top of a tree, hundreds of feet tall. Capillary action. It's why solid water is less dense than liquid water. This is an extremely important function of water. Why? Because it's what allows fish to live in rivers and lakes and ponds and oceans, because when the water freezes and turns from a liquid to a solid, it floats on top and the living organisms can survive underneath. And it helps insulate the water underneath. Whereas if it formed a solid sheet and sank, those organisms would be up at the top and more exposed. And if it froze solid, they wouldn't live at all. It's why water forms a meniscus. Whenever you are measuring water in some kind of measuring container, okay, then you always read the bottom of the meniscus. And what that means is that because water sticks to itself and it sticks to the side of the container, it forms this little bowl. The bottom of the bowl is the meniscus. That's something important when you go on to science in college. Some of you will go on to science in college, some of you won't, and that's okay. But for those of you that do go on to higher levels of science and you have to actually physically handle materials and measure certain amounts of water, you're always going to want to read the bottom of the meniscus. And that's because water molecules stick to each other and other molecules. Polarity, water is polar, right? So polarity is what makes water behave the way that it does. Remember, the oxygens are electron hogs. The hydrogens are not. The oxygen tends to be a little negative. The hydrogen's a little positive. That difference in charge is what allows water to behave the way that it does. So when you download these slides, you can watch a little YouTube video on this. You can see the structure of water. When water becomes solid, those molecules will form a crystal lattice. a very specific type of structure. It forms a six-sided shape, right? There's one side, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, six-sided shape, right? Hexagon. And you can see that in the formation of snowflakes. It's very organized and structured. Hydrogen bonding in DNA is very important. These are basically a bunch of molecules stuck together. This guanine is one type of molecule. The cytosine is another type of molecule. And you can see that the hydrogen on the cytosine is sticking by a hydrogen bond or an attraction between a positive and a negative, right? Sticking to the oxygen on the other one. The hydrogen on the cytosine, the hydrogen on the guanine, right here, is sticking to the nitrogen on the cytosine. The hydrogen on the guanine is sticking to the oxygen on the cytosine, right? So these sticky hydrogen bonds represented by the dotted lines are very important to life and living things because that's what allows DNA to form in that double helix. It's what holds the two strands of DNA together. It is an intermolecular bond, molecule to molecule. You can see the hydrogen bonded to the chlorine is an intramolecular bond, but the chlorine on this molecule bonded to the hydrogen on this molecule, with this weak hydrogen bond. It's always a weak bond, not a strong bond. This weak hydrogen attraction between the negative chlorine and the positive hydrogen on two different molecules is an intermolecular, molecule to molecule. In water, the covalent bond between an oxygen and one of its two hydrogens is an intramolecular bond. It's a very strong bond. But the attraction between the negative oxygen on one water molecule and the positive hydrogen on another water molecule, that attraction is a weak hydrogen bond, weak, strong, right? Weak hydrogen bond. And it is intermolecular, molecule to molecule. Notice before you take your test, one of the things I'm going to remind you of is make sure you can see all the colors on this periodic table. This is a periodic table provided on your test. Make sure you can see that the metals are tan, the metalloids are green, the stair step, right? Stair step. The nonmetals are that blue or purplish color, including hydrogen, and the noble gases are that pinkish color. All right, if you have questions, send me an email. Otherwise, have a great day.